Hello, invisible friend. April here, and the date today is March 2nd, 2026. Welcome to episode 334 of the Big Sky Astrology Podcast. And if I still sound a little bit like a person who's had a pretty rotten cold for the last week, that is exactly what is going on. And I'm sorry, I'm a little nasal and so forth. But rather than put off the podcast for another week, I thought I would go ahead and inflict my nasty sounding voice on you today. This week, Mars will enter Pisces, the sign of the spiritual warrior. Prepare to fight for what's meaningful to you. Eclipse season continues with a total full moon lunar eclipse in Virgo. The Sun and Jupiter spotlight positivity and optimism. Venus finishes up its journey through Pisces with an aspect to Uranus, then enters Aries and aspects Saturn and Neptune. Mercury makes a lovely aspect to Jupiter. And sorry, once again, no time for a listener question this week, but keep sending your questions for future episodes. On Monday, March 2nd at 6:16 a.m. Pacific Time, Mars enters Pisces and will be in that sign until April 9th. The best way to greet Mars in Pisces is to get a little bit steamy. Think of hot tea, long showers, saunas, anything that warms you up and kind of softens the edges. Mars is the warrior planet, but when it's in Pisces, it becomes more of a spiritual warrior. It's not so much about brute force and getting your way at all costs. Instead, it's really about fighting for what's important, what truly matters to you on a soul level, and doing it with as much compassion and empathy as possible. Mars in Pisces doesn't move in straight lines. Often when we think about Mars, we think we have a particular path that we are going to follow. But in Pisces, it isn't so much a tidy, orderly plan. And it's not always really obvious where we are headed. And yet somehow through intuition and timing, usually we get where we need to go. This is a Mars that asks us to trust the process and to let ourselves flow around obstacles instead of just trying to crash straight through them. Mars effort works better in this sign when it's guided by feeling rather than sheer willpower. Mars in Pisces reminds us that the world doesn't just give us structure and shared values. It also creates opportunities for abundance when we engage mindfully. And that is the idea of Mars being in the mindful sign of Pisces. Whether you're exchanging ideas or emotional support or actual goods and services, Mars in Pisces asks that you do it consciously and with care. When action is filled with meaning and sensitivity, it becomes not just effective, but also healing for yourself and for the world around you. And now for the moon report. And we begin, as always, with the week's major lunation. This week, that's the Virgo full moon and lunar eclipse on Tuesday, March 3rd at 3:38 a.m. Pacific Time. That's at 12 degrees, 53 minutes Virgo and Pisces. This is the latest in a series of eclipses we've had over the last year in Pisces and Virgo. It's not the last one in this pair of signs. We will have one more in Pisces, I believe. But we are coming to the end of this cycle. Now, the full moon in Virgo is rather close to the moon's south node at 8 degrees Virgo. And eclipses that happen close to the south node of the moon emphasize release and surrender, letting go, especially of negative qualities associated with the sign. So in this case, it's Virgo, and we know that what we're being asked to let go of are things like excessive criticism and also judgmental tendencies. Eclipses often bring changes. They mark moments in our journey when we've been moving in one direction for a certain amount of time, and now we find that we really have to change course and move in another direction. And in this case, it is purifying the Virgo qualities, the Virgo experience, and using our qualities of discernment and judgment to move toward the moon's north node in Pisces. This eclipse is a little bit of a reminder that while we are moving towards those Pisces qualities, the dreams, the spiritual objectives, that we still do have to function in the everyday world. We still do have to deal with things like mortgages and checking accounts and jobs and home repair. So we do have to keep doing Virgo, and we have to do Virgo in a good way on our way to our Pisces dreams and spiritual objectives. It can be helpful with eclipses to look to previous times when eclipses fell near the same degree of the same sign, because that means eclipses were landing in generally the same area of your chart. And whatever might have been going on in your life at that time might still be continuing in a subtle way in the present. For example, if we look back to a solar eclipse on September 1st, 2016 at 9 degrees Virgo, that might be a time period that would be instructive to looking at what you're working with right now, and especially go to the area of your chart with Virgo in it. Also, if you go back to March 3rd, 2007, there was a lunar eclipse at 12 degrees Virgo, 59, and eclipses in Virgo will show us where we are overlooking the forest because we are focused on each individual tree. This is the full moon in a lunar phase family cycle that began on September 2nd, 2024, with a new moon at 11 degrees 4 minutes Virgo. Virgo new moons are the time each year when we should take stock of how organized our lives are, how effective our daily routines are, how well we're taking care of our health, and whether or not we're able to be of service. That's what Virgo really wants from us, is to help others and to kind of help the world as well. So that was a new moon, 11 degrees Virgo. Where did that fall in your chart? And does that make a close aspect to anything in your birth chart that says this was an especially important new moon for you? 9 months after that new moon, there was a first quarter moon on June 2nd, 2025 at 12 degrees 50 minutes Virgo. That would have been a time to actually implement some of the plans you might have had in mind at that Virgo new moon. And now we're at the full moon in this cycle, and it's a lunar eclipse. So we know it's an especially important turning point in this lunar phase family cycle. Whatever it was you started in September 2024 at the new moon, what you put a little bit of effort and action into at the first quarter on June 2nd, 2025. Now you have a much clearer picture of where you stand in this whole 30-month lunar phase family cycle. Then, 9 months from now, there will be a last quarter moon on November 30th, 2026 at 9 degrees 3 minutes Virgo. That is the final action point in this cycle. What was it that you started back in September 2024? And what do you need to do now to adjust it and take it to completion? Let's look at the void of course moon periods for this week. On Monday, March 2nd, the moon in Leo opposes Mars at 4:27 a.m. Pacific time. It's void of course for about 7 minutes, then enters Virgo at 4:34 a.m. Opposition aspects, especially from the moon to Mars, can be somewhat frustrating. And with oppositions, we might be tempted to take our frustrations out on others. Instead, I think it's a really good idea during this void of course moon period. This is a nice, short void of course moon period. Many, at least on the west coast of the U.S., will probably still be in bed. So you're not apt to do a lot of harm or get into too many arguments or disagreements with people. But if you are up, if you're in a part of the country or the world where this is happening a little later, try to release some of those difficult Moon-Mars emotions through working out or taking a vigorous walk or something where you're releasing some of those physical tensions. On Wednesday, March 4th, the moon in Virgo trines Uranus at 6:53 a.m. Pacific time. It's void of course for 4 hours, 3 minutes, then enters Libra at 10:56 a.m. A trine between the moon and another planet as it goes void of course gives us an opportunity, a gift, maybe an offering or invitation or reward. The moon in Virgo, for example, excels at fixing problems. And since Mercury is retrograde at this time in Pisces, we could be having some problems with technology or communication or travel. And the moon in Virgo really can help us work those things out and fix them. And on Thursday, March 5th, the moon in Libra squares Jupiter at 3:22 p.m. Pacific time. It's void of course for a full day plus 4 hours and 39 minutes. So it's a good long void of course moon period. And then the moon enters Scorpio on March 6th at 8:01 p.m. The moon always tells us what we need to make us feel comfortable. And when the moon is making a square aspect to another planet before it goes void of course, we know that we're not feeling particularly comfortable, that we're in conflict in some area of our lives. While the moon is in Libra, harmony and balance in our relationships is taking priority. But Jupiter in Cancer, which the moon is squaring, focuses more on our inner circle. And it seems to exclude people who are not part of that inner circle. Use this void of course moon period to get in the habit of addressing relational concerns and communicative concerns with fairness and with objectivity. The moon in Libra is pretty graceful and wants to be inclusive of others. So we may see tension at this time between trying to include everybody and the desire to be a little more insular with that Jupiter in Cancer. But see what you can do to reach out to others and try to make them part of your inner circle. The Sun trines Jupiter on Thursday, March 5th at 9:14 a.m. Pacific time at 15 degrees 8 minutes Pisces and Cancer. This is a genuinely supportive and feel-good transit. I'm not here to say that everything that happens when Sun trines Jupiter is perfect and wonderful. But in this case, because the trine is happening between two water signs, intuition is very strong right now. And it's a good time to tap into your feelings, let them guide your choices, rather than overthinking everything or trying to force an outcome. This is a pretty good transit for promoting yourself, and it's also good for exploring your creativity, getting the attention that you deserve. And if you're thinking about marketing, sharing your work, putting yourself out there in some way, especially creatively, lean into what feels emotionally authentic. Anything that comes from the heart can reach people right now on a really deep level. One of the gifts of the Sun and Jupiter in aspect is that opportunities often appear with very little effort, almost just out of nowhere. And this is a trine that supports confidence and visibility, luck, and even a little bit of risk-taking. Now, that said, always a gentle note of caution applies, because Jupiter always wants more and more and more. The perils of overextending yourself or having too much of a good thing are real. And that can be that you're overcommitted, you've overspent, you're assuming that your good vibes are going to take care of everything on their own. So don't overdo it, and don't assume that just because something has started in a really easy way, that it is not going to take any effort or work on your part to really bring it to the point where you want it to be. And the Sun makes a conjunction with Mercury on Saturday, March 7th at 3:02 a.m. Pacific Time at 16 degrees 52 minutes Pisces. That means it is once again cazimi time. When a planet makes a conjunction with the Sun within 17 minutes of orb, it is in a condition we call cazimi, which means it's especially powerful. It is kind of taking some of the power of the Sun for itself. So when Mercury is cazimi, we gain clarity. But in this case, Mercury is not in the very best shape. It is retrograde. It is in Pisces, which is not one of its strongest signs. So we can get clarity for a moment here in this Mercury cazimi time, but we can't completely rely on the inspiration or the insights that come our way because of Mercury's condition otherwise. I think the clarity or good inspiration that comes our way when Mercury is conjunct the Sun at this time will be about anything that comes through our intuition instead of just our straight logical mind. If you want to know more about these cazimi periods, go back and check out the listener question on episode 259 for a refresher on the cazimi. This conjunction takes place at 16 degrees 52 minutes Pisces on the Sabian symbol 17 Pisces and Easter Promenade. It's a symbol that's kind of about the intensification of spiritual grace through celebration, the Easter celebration. The emotional aspect of spiritual practice is expanded here through group participation in ritual and ceremony. So this is a lovely time to celebrate your spirituality with a traditional public ritual, a parade, or some kind of gathering. Now, I wanted to cover several things that are happening with Venus this week. So it begins with Venus making a sextile to Uranus in Taurus, and here it is finishing up its journey through Pisces. So Venus in Pisces sextile Uranus in Taurus takes place on Wednesday, March 4th at 8:41 a.m. Pacific Time at 27 degrees 49 minutes Pisces, which is a degree that is especially beneficial for Venus. Venus is, of course, the planet of relationship, of money, of desire. When Venus is connecting with Uranus, we can find that things change, maybe, in a relationship. Now, this is a sextile, and it's not a real long transit. You might experience it, say, on March 3rd through the 4th. And it's probably not going to make any really dramatic changes in, say, relationships. But what's nice about the sextile from Venus to Uranus is it wakes us up. And if we've been in some kind of relationship, really of any kind, where things are getting a little bit stale and we feel as if we need a bit of a change, we don't necessarily have to leave the relationship, but we need to have something that sparks us a little bit. In a long-term relationship, this might be a fun night out. And if you are in a relationship that has been teetering on the brink for some time, this is the kind of little aspect that can lead you to make a decision about whether you're going to continue there or move on to another opportunity. Relationships could take some kind of really different turn. Now, money is also indicated by Venus, and when it connects with Uranus, there could be some unexpected development in our financial lives. We could come into a nice little chunk of money. We might end up with some kind of expense that comes out of nowhere that takes some of our money. And we might also decide that this would be a good time to take some of our money and perhaps make an investment in something new that is interesting to us. On Friday, March 6th at 2:46 a.m. Pacific Time, Venus enters Aries, and it will be in this sign until March 30th. It's not the best sign for Venus. It's not terrible, but Venus's usual character is to get along with others, to seek harmony, to not make waves. Aries is not like that at all. So Venus in Aries, however, is a very exciting place for it. And the people I know that have Venus in Aries can actually be a lot of fun. Venus knows exactly what she wants in Aries. It's a very no-frills placement for the planet. Venus in Aries likes the new things, the fast things, a fast car. It can be a little bit impulsive in the way it spends its money. So you want to be a little bit careful about that. And if there is a big purchase that you are wanting to make, it might be better to wait until Venus enters Taurus on March 30th. In terms of relationship, for Venus and Aries, the thrill is in the chase. It's a lot of fun to pursue a romantic connection. But then once you have secured the objects of your affection, you might decide that it's not necessarily a relationship you want to stay in for the long term. And almost immediately upon entering Aries, Venus makes conjunctions with Neptune and Saturn. And it begins with the conjunction to Neptune on Saturday, March 7th at 3:27 a.m. Pacific Time. And that will be at 1 degree 16 minutes Aries. This is a transit that's a little bit dreamy, even if it's in Aries. And it's also one that can bring some insights about relationships or financial desires, but not always in a really literal or practical way. And in fact, you might get your insights about these things through actual dreams. So pay attention to what shows up in your sleep or in your imagination, because something really appealing or desirable could capture your attention during this conjunction. It's a good idea to tread lightly, Neptune has this way of glamorizing whatever it comes in connection with. And under this influence, it's very easy to fall in love with a person or a plan or a fantasy, and then to find out it's not entirely appropriate or even sustainable. You have rose-colored glasses, and that's not always the best for making decisions. But on the positive side, this transit is wonderful for romance, dreamy dates, and it can open the heart and soften the rough edges that we can associate, especially with Aries. But relationships can also take a little bit of a beating right now, especially if one or both of the partners realize that they have changed and they can no longer pretend that they are the same person they were before in this relationship. Some connections might just quietly dissolve, and not out of cruelty, but just out of honesty. Money matters can come under review as well, particularly where hopes and wishes and assumptions have gotten in the way of solid information. By the end of this transit, the hope is that we have been able to let go of some of what drains us, especially people and situations that are no longer authentic or no longer really suit who we are. On Sunday, March 8th, Venus conjuncts Saturn at 6:40 a.m. Pacific time at 2 degrees 38 minutes Aries. And this is very different from Venus in aspect to Neptune. Venus in aspect to Neptune is about the dreams that we have and the illusions or disillusions that we have around relationship or money or our own values. But Venus connecting with Saturn asks us to take a real look at things exactly as they are. And sometimes this brings us to a place of cold, hard reality that does not feel that wonderful. Venus and Saturn together can bring up feelings of being unloved or unappreciated and worried that we will never have enough. Enough money, enough love, enough security. But Saturn is not here to punish us. Saturn actually wants us to feel good about ourselves, but in a way that we have earned. This is about self-respect that comes from showing up and doing the work and just following through. It's a pretty powerful transit, albeit a little short, for making realistic financial plans and sticking to them. If you want your relationships or your money situation to improve, Saturn is pretty clear. Saturn says it is up to you to make it happen. And that might mean managing what you already have more wisely. It might mean asking for help, whether that is from a friend or family or just the universe itself. If you are inclined toward doing ritual, this is a great time to just make a simple request of the universe. And since Aries is a fire sign, you might want to burn a candle or do some fire magic to help you ask for what it is you truly want. This transit can help you get clear about what you need versus what you want. Being able to ask for what you need is incredibly powerful. That's the kind of clarity that is real Saturn magic. On a more literal level, you might find yourself attracted to an older person or somebody in a position of authority. Or maybe you would receive a morale-boosting compliment or words of acknowledgement from a boss or a mentor or an authority figure. And finally, on Sunday, March 8th at 10:23 p.m. Pacific Time, Mercury trines Jupiter at 15 degrees 5 minutes Pisces and Cancer. Again, it's not a real long transit. Look for the effects of that on Sunday and a little bit into Monday. It's a nice aspect. It's a nice, smooth trine between the planet of details and the planet of the big picture. This is a big, watery, emotional, intuitive transit. And because Mercury is retrograde, it can feel like there is a little bit of a flood of information and impressions and emotions that are coming your way. And they can feel a little bit like miscommunication. It can also be literal things like travel delays, weather issues, actual flooding even in some places. But in any event, intuition and emotions will be running strong. And if you stay grounded, that can be kind of a nice thing. It's a great transit for sitting down and listening to what is being said inside of you. Mercury trine Jupiter does have a little bit of a caveat that goes with it, and that is that it's very easy during this transit to cherry pick the facts that support what you already believe. Everything feels meaningful and inspired and true, but not everything actually is. So you have to give yourself room to question and reflect. Write things down, because otherwise information can behave like we always say with Mercury and Jupiter. It's like an inverted funnel. So many ideas and impressions are pouring in that it can't quite squeeze into your little mind. If that happens, move your body. That can actually help quite a lot. Well, as I said, there were so many transits to look at this week that, once again, no time for a listener question. And I apologize because last week I had one picked out and we didn't have too many transits during the week. And I was looking forward to sharing that one with you. But of course I got sick and that didn't work out. So I'm saving that listener question for next week. And if you have any question you'd like me to answer on a future podcast, don't hesitate to send it. You can leave a voicemail of 1 minute or less at speakpipe.com/Big Sky Astrology Podcast, or you can always just send an email to me, april@bigskyAstrology.com. And be sure to put podcast question in the subject line. Well, that is everything on my show sheet, so I'm going to wrap this one up. Thank you for listening to the Big Sky Astrology Podcast and for putting up with my croaky little voice. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to subscribe or follow the show in your app of choice. It's completely free. Leave a rating or a review. And I hope that you'll help spread the word by telling an astrology-loving friend about the podcast. You can read show notes and full transcripts and leave your comments about each episode at bigskyastropod.com. I want to thank everyone who continues to show support for the podcast. Thank you so much, and especially during my September podathon. On each episode, I'm thanking some of my financial donors by name. This week, let's give a Big Sky Astrology Podcast shout out to Jillian Nelson and Wendy Weiss. Wendy and Jillian, thank you so much for listening to the podcast and for supporting the show with your donations. If you'd like to support the show and receive access to my bonus video episodes for donors only, please go to bigskyastropod.com and make a contribution of $10 or more to get those episodes. Or you can make a one-time donation in any amount or become an ongoing monthly contributor. That's it for this episode. Join me again bright and early next Monday. And until then, keep your feet on the ground and your eyes on the stars.